Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. One of the things that characterizes the Democratic Party is this just aggressive push for gun control. They really want to disarm the American people. They want to take guns out of our hands. They want to confiscate guns. And you've got a lot of Republicans that go right along with them on these gun control pieces of legislation. Now, rarely do you have Democrats or liberals, let's refer to them as liberals or progressives, who will so frankly admit what they want to do, who will just come right out and say it. So here's Bill Maher. This is clip 9. Here's Bill Maher talking with Representative Keith Ellison from Minnesota. Keith Ellison is a liberal. He is a Democrat. I believe he's the only open Muslim serving in the United States Congress. And so Bill Maher is talking here with Keith Ellison about the Second Amendment. And I want you to catch their exchange and hear what Keith Ellison says at the end of this clip, what he hopes the Democratic Party will do. Feast your ears on this.
The problem is the Democrats love guns, too. Now, when Mitch McConnell did that and held the gun up, here's what his opponent, the Democrat, tweeted. She said, "Someone tell Team Mitch that's not the way to hold a gun." Kentucky, there she is. Kentucky women do it better. See, that's the problem, is the Democrats are just as bad.
I don't think that's the problem. That's not
really.
No,
it's the
I
problem
don't.
with me.
Well, hey,
fine,
I'm a Republican. I'm for gun control. I just want to be.
I'm for gun control too.
Monolithic,
Let me just say, I'm for gun control, but I don't think you have got to eliminate ownership of all guns in order to get some common sense.
No, you don't.
Gun rules. I mean, 27 children were mowed down. Isn't that enough for us? One of our own colleagues, Gabby Gifford,
then
shot
why
in the face.
doesn't your party come out against the Second Amendment?
Bill,
I
sure wish they would.
So Bill Maher says, look, it was a little bit difficult to hear over the laughter, but Bill Maher says, why doesn't your party come out against the Second Amendment? It's the problem. That's what Bill Maher says. The problem here is the Second Amendment, that pesky Second Amendment, which says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Remember, the 9th and 10th Amendment said, look, if it's not a right that is granted to the central government in Article 1, Section 8, that right belongs what? To the states or to the people. So some rights belong to the states. If it's not a right that belongs to the state, it belongs to the people, which means that it's not a right even that a state can take away from you. No state would have the right to take away from you some right that belongs to the people of the United States. But that's exactly what the Second Amendment is. It is the right not of the states to have a militia. It is the right of the people to keep and bear arms. It's an individual right for individual Americans. Not even a state has the latitude, has the authority constitutionally to deprive people of their right to keep and bear arms because it's a right of the people. So that is the pesky problem for liberals. And Maher says, why didn't your party come out against the Second Amendment? Because that's the problem. And Keith Ellison says twice, I sure wish they would. I sure wish they would. So there's a Democrat, liberal on record, saying we need to come out against the Second Amendment. Let's go to Ernest, Shreveport, Louisiana. Ernest, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, actually, welcome back. I am Trey. My name is Ernest. I go by Trey also.
All right.
I just responded back to the next caller after me that I would rather have a job. But again, the issue is you would have to afford that opportunity equally across the board. And again, I'm from a neighborhood and from a place where I know the true plight of it. I've worked since I was 15 years old. I've only been out of work 6 months of my life after 15 years old, and I am 43 years old. I'll be 44 this month. So I would rather work. My track record shows it.
Yeah, well, and that's that's that Christian ethos, Ernest, that we're talking about. This is over and over again. You read in the New Testament. Where Paul says, look, when I came among you, I was not a burden to any of you. I worked with my own hands. And you can, talking to the Ephesian elders, he talked about working with his own hands. And you can You can just see him lifting up his hands to the Ephesian elders. With these hands, I worked with these hands to provide for the needs of my team and for my team. All right, Ernest, listen, I appreciate that very, very much, and I absolutely believe that about Ernest. He's got a biblical worldview, and that means it's a man's job not to depend on anybody else, including government, but it's a man's job to work hard with his own hands and take care of the people that are dependent upon him. Well, thanks for getting back to us and closing the loop on that. Now, Bart Stupak back yesterday or Friday with Neil Cavuto saying, look, I don't regret my vote for Obamacare because I believe health care ought to be a right. And I said at the close of the last segment, it cannot be a right. Health care cannot be a right because the only way health care can be a right is if you take money from certain people and transfer it to others. That means it cannot possibly be right because that's unethical. That is immoral. To take money from people against their will is theft. It's legalized plunder. And just because government does it under the color of law does not make it morally right. It might be legally right, but it is not morally or ethically right. So it cannot possibly be a right. And that's a simple way to think about it. If somebody says this ought to be a right or this is a right, ask yourself the question, does this make a demand on somebody else's right? Is this a right that can only be exercised if money is taken from somebody and given to somebody else? If it requires that, then it cannot possibly be a constitutional right or a moral right. Now, here is Bart Stupak back in 2010, clip 4, Rob. Bart Stupak talking again, and he was the one that sold us. He sold the Democrats on this. This is a pro-life bill. And, and here we are tomorrow. Here we are tomorrow. The whole deal before the Supreme Court is, are federal funds in these subsidies going to be used to pay for insurance policies that cover abortion? The answer is yes. There is no question about it. This is the very thing that Hobby Lobby is in court to protest, this forced funding of medications that can cause abortions. That's why we're in court tomorrow. So here's Bart Stupak back in 2010, and what he says here is absolutely untrue. Let's listen.
Current law with respect to abortion services include the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment and other similar statutes to it have been the law of the land on federal funding of the Hyde Amendment and other similar statutes to it have been the law of the land on federal funding of abortion since 1977 and apply to all other federal programs and all health care programs, including SCHIP, Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health Services, Veterans Health Care, military health care programs, community health centers, and the Federal Employees Health Benefit Program. The intent behind both this legislation and the executive order the President will sign is to ensure that, as provided for in the Hyde Amendment, that health care reform will maintain a ban on the use of federal funds for abortion services except in the instances of rape, incest, and endangerment life of the mother.
Now, what's wrong with what Bart Stupak says here, every single subsidy, every federal subsidy goes to purchase plans that cover abortifacients. Every single subsidy goes to purchase a plan that covers abortifacients. So federal funds are now being used to carry out abortions, if nothing else, using Plan B and the Elapill, these emergency contraceptives. Now here's Joe Pitts, clip 5. Again, back in 2010, Joe Pitts, in response to what Bart Stupak just said, here's what he said is the truth about Obamacare.
This bill violates the belief held by more than 70% of Americans that money collected by the government should not be used to pay for abortion or abortion coverage. But that's what this bill does. Regardless of the colloquy, an executive order is not a statute. It doesn't trump a statute. The government will end up directly paying for abortions at community health centers. Taxpayer subsidies will, for the first time in decades, subsidize insurance coverage that include abortion. The bill and the accompanying executive order turns over the protection of the unborn to the most pro-abortion president in our history. This extreme legislation is being forced on an unwilling nation. It is the most pro-abortion bill, the largest expansion of abortion in our history. No member who votes for it will ever be able to claim again that they've always stood on the side of the unborn.
That's Representative Joe Pitts just telling the truth. This is the most expansive pro-abortion legislation in the history of the Republic. Biggest expansion of abortion services, abortion coverage since Roe v. Wade in 1973. Joe Pitts is correct. 70% of the American people do not want taxpayer money used to fund abortions, and that's why part of the reason why Obamacare is such an albatross around the necks of Democrat candidates. Here's Larry Sabato, clip 6, talking about the danger now that Obamacare, because of what Joe Pitts talked about and the whole range of problems with Obamacare, why it is such a liability for the Democrats.
Look, Nancy Pelosi is from a deeply blue district. I have no doubt in her district, in the San Francisco area, you can be for Obamacare and not have any electoral problems. The difficulty for Pelosi and the Democrats is that in every single reliable survey for more than a year, or majority of Americans have been opposed to Obamacare for a variety of reasons. She's arguing the best defense is a good offense. The problem with that is when you are on the offense, using your time in the public arena to discuss a subject that people have more or less already made up their minds about and they don't like it, you're wasting your time in the arena. The second point, Neil, which I think is even more important for the midterm elections, the people who favor Obamacare, which is a minority, aren't really that enthusiastic about it, even if they favor it. But the majority who oppose Obamacare are much more charged up, and they're the people who tend to turn up in a low turnout midterm election.
Now, Larry Sabato, generally speaking, a pretty nonpartisan guy. I think he tilts left in his personal politics, but he tries to be objective when he's sizing up kind of electoral dynamics, and he says, look, this thing is just lethal for Democrats. The people that do support it aren't enthused about it. The people that are against it are passionate about it, and that has a huge impact on the results in midterm elections. Nate Silver, talk about him more tomorrow, says Republicans have a 60% chance of taking over the United States Senate. Well, here's a blessing for the rest of your day. May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you a spirit of unity among yourselves as you follow Christ Jesus, so that with one heart and mouth we may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. See you tomorrow.
The views and